Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone show this evening.
And a good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending where you all are today. It could be tomorrow somewhere else. So welcome to the Water Zone. I'm Rob Starr, along with my exclusive co-host, and he's just a super guy, Mr. Chris Davey. Chris, how are you?
Hey, very good, Rob. Thanks. I appreciate it, the call out today. And yeah, I am in the present. I am not in tomorrow yet, so I'm still here today, buddy. But here we are in the third week of winds and the third week of continuing fires here in Southern California, with another big one a couple of days ago up in the area where Miss Austin used to live. So I'm going to talk to her about that when she comes on and joins us.
So, Miss Austin, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing okay up here, enjoying this really lovely, lovely weather. It got so warm up here yesterday. The last couple days, mosquitoes have come out, so that's like no fun. It's like, wait, it's not time for mosquitoes yet. But yes, it's very nice up here. Yes, the Hughes fire, the newest fire that is happening in Southern California, I haven't looked in on it lately. They seem to have it under some control this morning, but the winds continue, I'm told. Is it windy there?
It is. It's breezy. It's not as windy as it was in, when it was wicked winds, but it's still pretty breezy. It's supposed to calm down. It was supposed to calm down overnight last night, but actually the winds picked up right at about sundown, and they were cranking till about midnight, but it hasn't been that bad at all today. So how close to Lake Hughes were you when you were living down here in Southern California, Chris?
Santa Clarita is just a little bit south of Castaic. It's in the same valley, but Castaic's up at the top of the valley, and I was sort of down a little more south and a little bit to the east, and in Canyon Country, as we say it, Canyon Country. We all drive pickup trucks in Canyon Country. That's what we used to say when we lived there, but yeah.
But that's what they, when I was living in Anaheim Hills, and I hear the report about traffic, like you said, in the canyon thing. Well, there's something named as a not a city, I guess it's a section in the city by Newport Beach called Canyon Country.
Oh,
and they were given, and so maybe I was thinking of one place when it was another, but it was called the same thing. So.
Oh yeah, no, Canyon Country is one of those. Kind of like Los Angeles. It's not a city. It's more of a place name within the city. There's like 5 different place names in Santa Clarita. And most people know of Santa Clarita as where Magic Mountain is. You say that, yeah. They don't know. But yeah, I hope all my neighbors are doing okay up there. I'm just like everyone, I'm sure would like to see these fires come to an end. If the wind is not too bad, then that means they can fight it from the air. And if you have not had the opportunity to see what these pilots do, you should go check out some social media, because they're really quite amazing. And we saw this a lot when we lived in Santa Clarita. Santa Clarita is on the outside edge of Los Angeles. It's a relatively newer community than, say, Altadena or Pacific Palisades. And all of our new developments in Santa Clarita are surrounded by these greenbelt, graded greenbelt areas that are maintained and watered. And so what they would do is they would let that, it's a chaparral coastal scrub kind of ecosystem over there. It's not a forest. It's something different. And chaparral likes to burn, and you can't really do vegetation management on chaparral. Burning is how it's managed. So what they would allow the fire to do is they would allow it to burn, and they would allow it to come up close to that little greenbelt area, and then the helicopter would come in with that shot of water and just lay it down right next. I mean, it was amazing and incredibly precise. Never lost a house that was in any of those developments. The houses that get lost are the ones that were built a couple decades ago, and they didn't do so much landscaping. And we had some areas in Canyon Country that kind of backed up to these natural areas and without any green belt or anything, and those are the properties that tended to burn. But they really know how to fight from the air. The problem why the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire got so bad is that the winds were too strong. They couldn't put the pilots in the air. But when they get going on that fire, man, I binge watched the fire drops on social media, because it just, when you see them lay it down and the fire go out, you just want to give a cheer. Yeah.
Well, it amazes me when the pilots go in and scoop out the water on the fly. You know, they load up some stuff and then drop it off, and it's just amazing. The retardant that they use, people have to be away from that when they do that. Is that correct? I would assume.
Well, you don't want to be hit with it, but you know, if you're on the fire lines, it's happened. You know, they're not intentional. But yeah, that fire retardant, you know, it's kind of nasty stuff. But we kind of know now it's nasty stuff, but there's not an alternative, and except to not use it and then have billions of dollars of property damage. So no one is saying can't use the Phos-Chek, but it is nasty stuff to be dropping on the environment, and it's nasty if it hits your car. You know, wash it fast. You know.
In their training, the firemen get warned to not get pretty and pink. That's their term. That's their term for it. So, I mean, but Chris, I mean, I was listening to reading some of the news coverage and listening to the news of when the Hughes fire first broke out. I mean, it was expanding at a rate of 30 acres per minute. Did you hear that stat?
Yeah, 30. I know. It's incredible. These wildfires are just really something else. Something that we have to figure out how to prepare for better, certainly. You know, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of discussions, and rightfully so. There's going to be a lot of investigations into, you know, what went wrong, what didn't go wrong. The government generally always does this, whether the politicians call for it in a high profile way or not. The government knows they need to go back and do a postmortem on all these kinds of things, because they will learn. They will learn what went wrong. They will learn what to do better. And I'm sure we will probably have a discussion on how our urban water systems might be modified to be better at fighting these types of urban wildfires that we had. You know, it was the water system is set up to, I actually read that by regulation, the water district has to provide fire flows enough to put out the largest commercial building in its district if that gets on fire. So, you know, that's not a wall of fire coming into a neighborhood. You know, that's like an impossible thing to fight. So if we're going to require or really going to want our urban water systems to be able to handle that, we're going to have to talk about that and design for that and build for that, because that's not the way it's done now. Mm-hmm. You know, Santa Clarita provides a really good, you know, vision of what it can look like building in that urban wildland interface. Is very effective, although if the fire had broken out in 80-mile-an-hour winds in Santa Clarita and they had not been able to put the pilots in the air, I'm not sure. You know, it could have done extensive damage. You know, because it's the air fight is really where we really specialize. But you know, if if you haven't seen it, go binge watch on social media. It's amazing. The best one I saw was the picture of the Super Scooper. No, it wasn't the Super Scooper. One of the planes, the big planes, laying down Phos-Chek, and they said, California state bird, marking its territory.
Well, staying on that topic, I was reading in your article today about the farmers are cheering. Environmentalists are expressing concern over the water order that's coming down from the federal government.
Well, yeah, and it's going to be real interesting to see how this plays out. That executive order was kind of vague. I think what he's saying is he wants the biological opinions that came out of his administration to be reinstated. I don't know if you can just instantly do that. I mean, I think President Trump thinks he can, but, these are agencies and there's procedures. And what's interesting is that these new biological opinions are, Newsom put out a chart that says that they're delivering more water under these biological opinions than they would if they were under Trump's biological opinions, because they set up some different things. And they were developed very collaboratively with the urban water suppliers and some of the farmers. There's a lot that don't like these new biological opinions, but there's some that do. And the urban people are pretty happy with them, and so they're different. But I'm not so.
No, I was going to say it opens up a pathway to discussion. That's what needs to happen. That all these different sides need to get together and look at these things and understand from each perspective.
Well, the ironic thing is that is exactly what just happened. For the last 4 years, when President Obama passed the WIN Act and he had these, biological opinions, they started doing them. They required quarterly meetings with the public. And so there were, plenty of opportunities for everybody to participate and give their input. Actually, exactly what you said is exactly what happened. And then they finished the biological opinions and they adopted them in December, and off we went. I'm not, we're just going to have to see where this all goes. I don't think you can just roll back to these other biological opinions, and I am not sure that people really want to, because there were some hard-fought things in the biological opinions that they just completed, more real-time monitoring and being able to respond in real time. That fall X2 thing that everybody was mad about is out of it. They were in the previous biological opinions. So it's really not that the Trumps were good and the new ones are bad.
Right.
Trumps were different, and these are different, and there's people fought for things that are in these biological opinions. So I don't know what's going to happen, because this is, somewhat unprecedented. I mean, well, the precedent of the president coming into office and ordering the biological opinions to be rewritten, that seems to be, I believe, Biden, Trump, into office said rewrite the biological opinions in 2016, and they got finished just shortly before he left office. And then Biden came in and said rewrite the biological opinions. So we all went back and rewrote the biological opinions, and now Trump's in office. So it's kind of like seems to be a change of administration. We're going to change the biological opinions. These biological opinions are important because they control how those water projects operate. So they're actually very critical. And I think if I were to make a guess, I would think that there are probably lots of people that are dealing with this that just would wish that the biological opinions would just be done so we would know how we're going to operate the water project.
Trying to get all this stuff together. I mean, I sometimes think whoever is the president, just in that position, it should be a 6-year term instead of a 4-year term, because it's really hard to redo a government in 4 years. It's like impossible.
Two years.
that would be crazy.
Well, Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to ask Chris. I say, with all this stuff coming down, right? I mean, this is the first show we're doing under the new administration with President Trump in office and a pretty good lead in the Senate and a marginal lead in the House. What do you think is going to come on the block first to be discussed? Is it like all the Biden's infrastructure stuff that he's put down there, or now Trump is saying people over fish, all these things? What do you think is going to come up and get smacked first?
I really, really don't want to be discussing politics because it's very hard and it's very opinionated, and I really try to stay out of it. So I'm going to have to respectfully decline. I'm not going to get weighed into that mess. What do I think I think the biggest challenges that we face is that, I'll say this in the best way possible, Trump doesn't understand California water. He thinks he does, but he doesn't. We have no giant valve that routes water down magically to L.A. As big as a house. He keeps talking about this. It doesn't exist. There was no water restoration agreement. That was a biological opinion. It's a permit process. The governor does not sign it. The water regulations have nothing to do with why the hydrants failed. So, but I do understand this. It's hard to understand California water. It's complex. It's the reason why I can have a whole website that puts out an amazing amount of news all on this one subject. It's not because it's so easy and we're all stirring up trouble just to keep ourselves employed. It's complex stuff, really complex stuff. And so he could sort of be forgiven, but he should go educate himself.
I think we should take up a collection from us and your listening audience and send you to Washington.
Oh, no way, no way.
Or send you to how about Sacramento? That's shorter. It's closer.
There you go. But, the problem is there's not one big faucet. There's more like 5,000 little faucets. There are dams on every river in California. I think we have 1,200 dams and far, far more people with straws in the water sucking it out. There are little knobs all over the place. It would be great if there was one big giant knob. That would make it much easier, but that's not the case. And actually, that's so wrong. It's actually the complete opposite is true. There are thousands, probably tens of thousands of dams, diversions, weirs that are controlling water in some aspect here in California. So.
Well, hopefully we can get somebody to let them know that we have a Water Zone show and he can tune in to listen to this and get more familiar. But Chris, go ahead.
No, just like he better like us, otherwise we'll be creamed on social media.
That's true.
Chris,
that's
one more quick comment for you, if you will, because as you know, there's some weather coming in this weekend. We've just had all these fires. There's scars all over the place, and now for the first time in 10 months, there's a low pressure system that's going to dip below, the Baker's Acres area into Southern California. Hopefully it won't be too bad, but it's going to be, there could be some thunderstorms and stuff. So a lot of resources now being put into work in preparation for the storm on Saturday night, Sunday, and Monday.
Yes, and Newsom sent down some debris specialists, DWR, a lot of as much. Sacramento is throwing as much at this as they can. Yeah, hopefully it's not going to be a big one. Southern California could really use some rainfall, just not an atmospheric river. Just not a lot of it. But there could be problems in the burn areas. So if you are close to those, please take precautions,
Absolutely. Well, Chris, we love you every single week. You are great. Tell our listeners, hey, I've told you every since she's been on the show, go to her website. It's www.mavensnotebook.com. Become a subscriber and get your daily information from her. I get mine in the morning, first thing when my PC comes on. So does Chris Davey. And you can also become a sponsor of the show. Again, going to www.mavensnotebook.com. It's our water Bible here, so we appreciate that. So, Chris, you stay nice and comfy up in the northern part of the state, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a little break and be back with our featured guest, and take it away.
One of the most time-saving tools I found for my customers is our app and our e-commerce feature. So customers actually have the ability to view all of their quotes in one place. If you contact your Site One seller, you'll be able to log into your account and see all your quotes in one place. And instead of jumping on the phone or waiting for your seller to call you back, you can approve it right from the website, and it will send a message to your sales rep to get it on order and reserve the material. Customers can learn more about these tools at their Site One branch, from their local seller, from their local CX specialist, and from SiteOne.com, or by downloading the Site One app.
Well, welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone Show with myself, Rob Starr, along with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Chris Davey. And we have a very interesting guest today, a very good guest today. And his name is Troy Hayes, and he is the general manager for Phoenix Water out in, obviously, Phoenix, Arizona. So, Troy, welcome to the Water Zone.
Oh, thanks for having me.
For our audience, we always ask a couple of different questions, and we always start off with, how did you get drawn into the water business? What drove you to choose that as a career?
Well, it's kind of a funny thing. So my background is I have a degree in chemical engineering, but my father was in the water wastewater industry. So I grew up around water plants and, pipes and things like that. And so as I was getting out of school, I was naturally drawn to the consulting side. And so for about 6 or 7 years there, I did consulting for a local engineering firm here in Phoenix, designing water and wastewater systems in the valley. And then after that, I was asked to come over to the city to be the water treatment plant engineer. So the engineer responsible for all the water treatment plants we had. And at the time we had 5 water treatment plants that I was responsible for. And so we did that for a lot of years. So essentially through family ties and just being familiar and all those things, I can remember being, 6 or 7, going on the tours enough to be able to talk about coagulation and flocculation and all those sorts of things. It's not really normal for a 7-year-old to do.
You're absolutely right. Your water agency is pretty committed to what water does and the conservation of that. I mean, a lot of things that you guys done over the years. Your Phoenix Tucson Water Exchange, your watershed protection projects, your Colorado River resiliency. And there's an old, in fact, you have it on your website, a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, which says, "The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation increased and not impaired in value." And I think that's a really bold statement coming from Roosevelt years and years and years ago. But you guys stand by that, and you've done an awesome job directing what you're doing there. And so I want to, unfortunately, I live in Buckeye. I don't have your water service, but You're doing a great job from what I hear. So let's talk about water treatment and such. And I know that's a big important factor. I understand you have 5 treatment plants, I think you said.
Yeah.
In that, and then you're looking at doing something even larger than that, from what I understand.
Right. So we have our water treatment plants actually started back in the 1940s. Was the first water treatment plant that was built for the city of Phoenix. And back then, it treated water directly from one of our local rivers, from the Verde River, that then sent water then into town. And then, as kind of Phoenix, as a lot of the western cities kind of grew, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we kind of added treatment plants. It seemed like every decade or so, we added another one there. Finally, ending with our first Colorado River plant that came online in 1986. The Union Hills water treatment plant. So we have 3 surface water treatment plants that treat water on the Salt and the Verde River systems, which is, like I said, our local rivers. And we have 2 plants that treat Colorado River systems. And those were adequately supplied, to treat, whatever the water that Phoenix needed even today. What, as all of the West is concerned about, is we're concerned about the Colorado River and the issues that it may have. And so, as you said in our quote from Roosevelt, is we build off of what our predecessors have built. I get to really rely upon the water resources and the planning that happened decades before I got here. But now we need to plan for, as we move forward, what's the next phases of those, and we're moving towards advanced water purification, or putting plants online that would take water that would get treated through a traditional wastewater treatment plant, and then water that would normally be discharged back into the river, into the Salt River in this case, to be able to take that past drinking water standards. We have a small facility, the Cave Creek facility, which is currently under construction, and we're hoping to get that online in 2026. That's about 8 million gallons a day. But we're also looking regionally and broadly of how we can help the whole region do this. And so there's a project that we have at the 91st Avenue facilities to look at building potentially a 50 to 90 million gallon a day facility to take water that, like I said, normally would have been discharged back into the river, to take that to an additional water treatment plant with high treatment processes to treat that past drinking water standards. And so we would be, employing, technologies like ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, UV, ozone, and those sorts of things to be able to treat water, like I said, well past what the drinking water standards are today.
Well, this is Chris Troy, and I want to give you a welcome to the Water Zone myself. Great to have you on. I'm going to ask you a question because I know our listeners, and they're probably going to be asking when we do air this show, where does the water come from for Phoenix Water? I mean, what's your source? You've talked about the Colorado River a little bit, but for a little more detail, can you tell our listeners where you get your water from?
Yeah, so I will simplify it as much as possible, because it's each of these water sources we have varying water rights and things like that. But in general, about 60% of our water comes from the local rivers here, the Salt and the Verde River system. And so waters that would normally fall on the watersheds up in the northern part of Arizona would then come down. We get, like I said, about 60% of our demands are met with that. About 40% of our current demands are met with Colorado River water, and then about 2% or so of groundwater. And I know you guys had Cynthia Campbell on, a month ago or so. And so Phoenix really made a conscious decision in the 1980s to move away from groundwater and to save that as a resource of last resort is how Phoenix views that. Because we live in the arid Southwest, and with climate adaptations and things like that, it's even becoming more arid. So it's really difficult to recharge and get those groundwater levels to be able to be maintained. And so we know, for the greatest extent, if we start pumping groundwater and start removing that from the local aquifers, that'll be really hard to then put that back in. And so we save that as a resource of real drought conditions, or when you really need it, kind of a thing, of a last resort. And so we mostly go between the Salton and Verde River systems and the Colorado River systems to be able to provide that. We had a project that we completed here within the last year or two to be able to tie the two parts of our areas together. In general, the city of Phoenix is a long cylindrical kind of looking city, where the southern part was generally got its water from the Salton Verde River systems, and generally the northern part got its water from the Colorado River system. And that's kind of how Phoenix developed, through the ages. We put some infrastructure into place, some pipelines and some pump stations into place that would give us the ability to move whatever water resource we had to wherever it needed to go, whether that was moving Salton Verde River systems up north to our Colorado River systems, or conversely bringing that Colorado River water down south in larger volumes than we were able to do before.
Hey, just a quick follow-up then on just that thought, Troy, because you mentioned a good part of your water is provided from the Colorado River project, but has the drought on the Colorado River project affected water allocation to your district much?
It does, with not necessarily to the taps. And so, like I said, we have additional resources over and above what we utilize. And historically, what we've done to that, I think what Cindy talked about, is we've stored some of that down in Tucson and their aquifers, because conversely, they're a 100% groundwater system, and so they can leverage their wells and things like that. And then we've stored some things earlier. So the cuts that we've seen on the Colorado River system so far haven't affected water deliveries or things like that. It's been more of what we're doing with, storing water or the excess water that we have.
Well, I know on your looking at some of your data on your website, it shows that your water agency has a really deep commitment to water conservation. And I was blown away from 1996 to 2020. You had an increase of over 400,000 residents for the population, but you got down to 92 gallons per capita daily for each person. That's amazing. Utterly amazing.
I think what I would say is what we've seen with our residents is they've really adapted to the desert lifestyle. When you go back and you look at Phoenix in the 1950s, you see a lot of grass and other things that you would normally see, maybe in eastern cities and things like that. But as Phoenix has grown and adapted, you start to see more of desert landscaping, or the xeriscaping, which takes less water. You see homes and businesses changing out their fixtures, their toilets and their washers and dryers and things like that to become more efficient. And then recently, through policy, our city council has put the forethought of, let's even ask as we move forward to put some parameters around that. And so they've adopted some policies around growth and adding houses to make sure that when houses are built now, they're under the EPA WaterSense guidance of making sure that we're even more conscious about how we use water inside and outside the homes, making sure that the outside the homes have, irrigation controllers, making sure that we're, reducing the amount of grass that may be, reducing, the pools or other things of as we go forward. But like I said, when we really look back of our existing customer base, they really have adapted and moved to that. What we've seen is a lot of people, removing that grass that was installed in the 50s and moving towards more drought-resistant, tolerant plants and other things like that. And so you really see really attractive landscaping, but yet not necessarily needing more water. And so it's really created that dynamic in which you've talked about, is we're able to some extent, decouple growth from water usage, where we're able to stay within the water that we, delivered in 1990, per se, with the same customer base that we have now, even though we've gotten larger.
That's amazing. Chris is from California. I moved here built a home out here from California. And, one of the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the California State Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, they put the Sigma in place and some other things, as you mentioned, using WaterSense and all of that products. The question, let me just ask you, then I'll get back to the wastewater and the treatment plant. So when new homes are being built, they follow a procedure of this is the kind of equipment that you need to put in to make sure you have spray heads with of high efficient nozzles, smart irrigation controller, things of that sort. But what happens after that's done and people buy the homes and they move in, and say a couple of years down the road they move away or they sell their homes? Is Arizona thinking about going back to the public and saying, okay, you had to fill in your products, your property with all the right WaterSense products, but now the system is older and it hasn't been checked out or hasn't been audited again, and it's out. I'll use the word out of conformance. What happens then? Does anybody ever check that, or it's a one-time shot when you buy the home or build the home, and then nobody has to account for it afterwards? Is that something?
Yeah, I think I think it's a couple of things. Yeah, obviously there's the initial audit that has to be done by the third party that would certify the homes as an EPA WaterSense home. And I think what we see by the home builders, even the national home builders, is really embracing that and selling that as part of their pitch to buy the homes for a sense. But the other thing that we have in our advantage is really you can't go buy a 4-gallon a flush toilet anymore. You can't get a dishwasher that's going to be outside of those ranges. And so really what we're leveraging on is the technology as well as the federal guidelines of manufacturing, of really trying to push down that water use and be efficient. And so it'd be really difficult for somebody to go replace it with an inefficient fixture or something like that. It'd be really hard to do. The other ones that we are looking into is potentially putting that into the HOA language, right? So there would be the requirements to uphold that even as the community moves forward.
That's a good idea. I know out here where I live, they're talking about adding another 100,000 homes at the west end of the valley, and that's going to be a challenge if there's even enough water for 100 years for that plan. Yeah. But going back to the original topics, so you want to build one of the world's largest water recycling plant, and that's an interesting challenge. And is that something that's self-funded, or you get grant money for that? And tell us a little about that.
We're hoping for all the above, and so we're currently on the large one. We're doing a feasibility study, and you're like, well, why are you doing that? If you're saying that it's not feasible, as well, no, that's one of the federal requirements to start engaging with them, and it's really starting to interact with the Bureau of Reclamation and the federal government on their drought funding for things. Because one of the good things about the facility is it's really drought resilient, right? It's a water source that's, irregardless of drought conditions, as long as you're consuming water, you'll have this water source continue on. And it's allowing us to be able to stretch really our water that we do have to go even farther, to get, more cycles in it. And it's really, people say it's innovative and things like that, but if you take it back to its roots for decades and decades, as you go along the Mississippi River, this has been happening on an indirect kind of a basis where the town up above takes in the water, they treat it, it goes to the wastewater plant, they clean it, return that back to the Mississippi River, and the next town down below does it and does it again and does it again. It's really trying to take control, our community taking control of the water that we do have and making sure that we're using it to the highest and most beneficial use and putting that back into the drinking system.
Troy, that was a great historical perspective for sure. I appreciate you throwing that in there. But, taking let's take a closer look. Maybe we can dig into the city's goal of the advanced water purification that you mentioned right at the top of the show there. I mean, there's a ton of new technology out. There's lots of people working on this issue day in and day out at different companies. Kind of give us, the 30,000 view look at it, and then we'll see if we can dig into a couple of things.
So from the high view, California has a few of these facilities. We've visited a few of them, installed. A lot of what they're doing with it is for the groundwater replenishment districts. Orange County has one that we visited. It's like 100